Hello, good afternoon. My goodness, I've never thought I will be in a place like this, in a position like this. My mother will never believe me that I'm here. Anyway, so thank you again, Grand Rapids Community College and all the sponsors for this wonderful series. It is really something to look forward to every single year. I am pleased to introduce Mr. Henry Munoz. Henry Munoz III is a nationally respected voice in the discourse about the imprint of Latino culture and identity upon American society in the 21st century. He is a designer, a social activist, an opinion leader, and a philanthropist. He works across multiple platforms that converge at the intersection of politics and the built environment. Fascinating. As chairman of the board and chief creative officer of Munoz & Company, he leads one of the largest and oldest minority-owned design practices in the country. Munoz & Company shapes the skyline and the landscape of the U.S.-Mexico borderlands, practicing a community-based architecture in pursuit of a blended cultural expression that more fully reflects our multicultural reality. For his approach, Mr. Munoz and his colleagues have been recognized with more than 130 jury design awards. He is also the founder of the effort to create a national Latino museum on the mall in our nation's capital, serving as chairman of the National Commission established to study the creation of what will be known as the Smithsonian American Latino Museum. Mr. Munoz is an alumnus of Loyola University, New Orleans, and previously served on the Board of Trustees. In the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina, Munoz and his colleagues contributed comprehensive design services to establish a master plan for the Loyola University New Orleans campuses. In 2013, Mr. Munoz joined Don Graham, CEO of Graham Holdings, and Carlos Gutierrez, former Secretary of Commerce, as founders of the Dream.us. Write that down and go to that website, the Dream.us. Together, they have raised over $80 million to find a solution to the problem affecting both our nation and its undocumented immigrant youth. Their goal is to enable thousands of highly motivated dreamers to graduate with career-ready degrees over the course of the next decade. In June 2015, Mark Zuckerberg, you probably have heard of him, CEO of Facebook, and his wife Priscilla Chan joined Mr. Munoz in this effort by donating $5 million to the Dream.us. Mr. Munoz is currently the National Finance Chairman of the Democratic National Committee. And for those of you checking out our prize this week, you will find Mr. Munoz, he designed Port of Entry, which is our prize entry that is located right on Calder Plaza, which is built with jarritos, the Mexican pop. It's a colorful and iconic Mexican sodas. And now, we all have the opportunity to hear Mr. Munoz's story of hard work and determination in pursuing the American dream. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Henry Munoz.
Thank you, Carlos. Wow, I'm a design person, and so I have a great appreciation for the way that buildings affect the way that you feel. I did start my day at the White House with the President and the Pope, and here I am ending my day in this beautiful space. So this is wonderful and a little bit intimidating. If you believe Carlos's introduction, then you would think that I never sleep. But I sleep on a lot of planes. Nowadays, I travel around the country trying to understand the meaning of diversity. So I'm very proud to be in Grand Rapids, a place where my godchildren live and where my best friend lives, to kick off this lecture series that is about really the American story in the 21st century. The very first time I came to Grand Rapids, my godson, Max, said, who had just moved here from New York City, said, "I think I'm living in the land of albinos." The truth of the matter is, over the course of the next few days, with the help of people like Chris and Carlos and some of you in this audience, I began to realize that absolutely wasn't the truth. That there was a story woven here in your community that in many ways reflects the future direction of the United States, and that is what diversity is about. Okay, Chris? This is an interesting combination of a photograph and a drawing taken in a small South Texas town along the border between the United States and Mexico. And if you look at this little face right here between these two beautiful old men who had spent their entire lives working in the fields of Texas and Michigan, holding the American flag on this very hot day in the summer of 1965, you'll see my face. Because I was raised in a family of activists at the height of the civil rights movement. Next. And my father taught me that the march of a people, the movement of a people, begins with the steps of just one person. And I've never, ever forgotten that. Go back. Okay. I like piñatas, and I'd like to particularly break this one. But this is really about the fact that in the country that we live in, things have changed a great deal, and yet they remain the same. And for many people, and in particular the young people who are here this evening and who watch this in their classes in the days to come, you should never forget that there is a struggle, a war in this country that is fueled by hate and in some cases ignorance and intolerance, and in the jobs that I have, I see it. And while it may make great reality television, it is really important that you understand what is at stake in this great country of ours, because I believe that one person with a dream and an opportunity to make their voice heard can change the direction of a community or a country. Next. That's why over the course of the last couple of years I've become so committed to a group of young people who really, I think, have had absolutely no voice, and yet who over the course of the last several years have began to speak truth to power in Washington and in other places around the country, and have begun to change the course of their own lives and the lives of other people, even in the absence of, for example, a piece of legislation that would lead to comprehensive immigration reform. This is a demonstration, a good old-fashioned demonstration, like the kind that I used to be taken to in the 1960s, organized by a group of young people called Dreamers. They call themselves Dreamers because they're in this country to realize the benefits, the opportunities, and yes, the challenges of the American dream. I am incredibly proud that based on just a couple of conversations with Don Graham, let me tell you about Don Graham. You may have, do people in this room remember Watergate? And so Watergate, the story of Watergate, was in many ways told by the Washington Post. And the owner of the Washington Post was a woman by the name of Katharine Graham. And Katharine Graham's son, kind of like me, who grew up in an environment, right, of social activism, became the publisher of the Washington Post. And when he knew that part of his life was coming to an end, he decided that he wanted to devote the rest of his life to helping people. And so one day, a friend of mine and of his said, "I think you all should meet each other." And I said, "Who is Don Graham?" That's how dumb I was. And we got together and we started to talk about how we might do something that would change the course of people's lives one person at a time. And that idea became the idea of a scholarship fund. And we asked Carlos Gutierrez, who was the Secretary of Commerce, if he would join us in that effort. And in the first meeting that we had, we said, "Do you think we can raise $1 million?" And at the end of a month, we'd raised $1 million. And so then we said, "Do you think we could raise $2 million?" And so we tried to raise $2 million, and we did. And then by the end of the year, by traveling the country and talking to people, we had raised $26 million. We just passed the second year anniversary of this idea, and I'm very proud to say that based on that idea, we have raised, actually today, $91 million to send young people to college. And that idea of young people just like yourselves, who would have thought that they have hope but no power, they've convinced people like Bill and Melinda Gates and Laurene Powell Jobs and Mark Zuckerberg to be a part of the dream. Next. Because I believe that people, even people with no money, can use what they have to tell the story to their families and to their neighbors about the true idea of the United States of America. I think that we sometimes have a notion of purity in this country, that we were founded by pilgrims at Plymouth Rock or at Jamestown, when the truth of how we came together as a nation couldn't be farther from that. About 25 years ago, based on my experiences, I decided that my firm could be a place of activism, and that I would look for beauty and cultural expression and identity in the places that other people would not look. And so one of the most important things about my life has been this search for great architecture, but in unexpected places. This is a combination garage and produce stand in South Texas that is painted this incredible color of green, and that is this very interesting blend of indoor-outdoor, and that is bilingual and sits right next to the AutoZone that could be anywhere in the United States. Next. And when I started to look at the way that people treated their houses or their front yards or their neighborhood business, I began to realize that there was probably a great tradition of Latino-influenced architecture on our country. I just had to find it, and I found it in churches. This is a fragment of a church that is in a place in San Antonio, Texas, that was just declared, that was for many years ignored, but was just declared a World Heritage Site, and it is this beautiful pattern. Next. And we began to take small things and turn those patterns and colors into proper architecture. This is a major university in Texas that takes those patterns and turns it into the symbol of an academic building. Next. And I found that in so many places and in so many ways, young people, even if they were disenfranchised, if they felt like they didn't have a community to belong to, had ways of expressing themselves. Everybody's seen a wall like this, right? But the beautiful thing about this for me was the fact that there is that word, imagine, imagen, at the top. And it taught me that for generations of whether it be on the side of the building or branded on a piece of cattle or in a sign, that people were attempting to express themselves. And so that became a carpet pattern, which looks like this, which has these beautiful words in it. Next. And it led to a real discussion, kind of a scholarly discussion with artists and craftsmen and geographers and demographers about traditions that you found in architecture around the United States that had come from other places. Next. And that in many cases were very formal, but in some cases were just the way that people express themselves in their house or in their business. And I'll tell you, when you try and convince a university that they should let you paint a building like this, you have some very interesting meetings. But the truth of the matter is that over the course of that exploration, I began to understand that community colleges and universities and schools really needed to begin to look like the young people and the families that they were hoping to inspire. Next. And we began to think about, over the course of that time, that maybe it wasn't just about architecture, that maybe you needed to include the voice of everyday people or other kinds of thought leaders in this work. And in this case, for example, the idea of bilingual education or of being of two languages, or people who were either separated from a system or integrated into a system because of their language or the lack of understanding going back and forth, was just as important to these learning environments. So here is, I actually worked with this writer by the name of Ana Celia Centella, and that conversation, next, became a bilingual building, a place that produces more educators, more bilingual educators than any other place in the United States. Next. And I fell in love with the things like what's happening out on the plaza in your community today, the informal architecture and the informal experience, and in particular, color. Next. And I began over the course of those years, both in architecture and in my public service career, and in the conversations that I had with people, to understand that really the great American experience of the 21st century was one of what my grandmother would have called mestizaje, of a blending of people, that even if you didn't realize it, that in even a community like Grand Rapids, which has been shaped and formed by migrant farm workers, by people of diverse backgrounds, that there is a blended experience in the United States that's very counter to what we teach in the history books of our country, but is the reality of our country at this moment in our history. Okay. So I thought I'd show you a couple projects before I get back to the personal story. This is a place that has been adopted by the Smithsonian Institution, where I've been on the board for many years, that is a very poor community that struggled for about 10 years to build a theater just about the size of this church in a place called Ed Couch and Elsa, which is named after a man and his wife, that actually was even up to the 1970s was divided by race. So if you were Anglo, you lived in Ed Couch, and if you were a person of color, you lived in Elsa. And they wanted a theater that would bring people together. And so we didn't have a lot of money to build this facility next. And so it was basically a pre-manufactured building, but we were searching for an identity for the theater that would allow it to speak to the students and to their parents. And we found that this particular community sent more young people to Ivy League schools than any other place along the border between Texas and Mexico. So we decided that we would have a conversation with people just like this, and we put students and parents and teachers in a room with people from museums and people who represented foundations. And in the middle of this conversation, somebody, I think he may have been about 15 years old, responded to the question, "What makes you different?" by saying, "Well, on Friday nights, before we go out and play football, we play our football corrido." A corrido is a piece of music that's very specific, right? I guess I would call it a folk song, and it's called La Máquina Amarilla. And so we took $25,000 out of the budget, and we took the patterns of La Máquina Amarilla, this song, and we decided that we could paint the side of this building with the rhythm of that song that could only be in one place. Could only be in Ed Couch, Elsa, could only be La Máquina Amarilla next. And so that's the building. It's a very simple building, upon which next, can you go back? Upon which we then kind of built it up so that it would be higher than any other building in town. And with those $25,000, we painted that mural, which kind of looks like a serape, but in reality is the story of their school and their people, and represents the hopes and aspirations, not of the people from the Smithsonian that were there, but of the students. Next. Can you go back one? And so it is interesting that the building shaped the community, because based on this conversation, the Cooper Hewitt Museum, the National Design Museum in New York, adopted this school district. And for years now, there's been this effort to teach people who maybe never thought that design was all around them how to be designers, how to affect their community by encouraging conversations that then make a difference in the day-to-day lives of people. This is a project that was done 2 years ago in Miami. Miami in December has people from all over the world come there to participate in what is called Art Basel. But they had never really seen anything like this. This was an attempt to take an everyday object that could be bought for 25 cents or 50 cents by anybody and turn it into a piece of art. And next. And so we built a cube out of 17,000 Jarritos bottles, right? Wrapped in a plaza that tells the story of the Latino community of the United States. Some people would look at that cube and they would see what I just described, and other people next, they just thought it was pretty cool and they all wanted to come and have their picture taken in front of it. And it became incredibly successful, and it has given birth to a project that I'm going to tell you about that is here at Art Prize this week. The interesting thing about this project, though, is that instead of it going to a gallery or a museum, at the end of the project, all of these people from the surrounding neighborhoods in Miami came, and they all took a piece of the sculpture with them, either to drink or to keep as a recuerdo. But it was, for me, the first time that our firm participated in the creation of fine art but it was fine art that was rendered in a way in which it spoke to anybody, including these young people. So that when I came to Grand Rapids, where my godson had told me that this was not the city that I discovered, and I was invited to give this TEDx talk, I decided that I should do some very serious research into the history of Grand Rapids and Michigan, and how this community has been impacted by the Latino story of the United States. And when I look into the audience this evening, it pretty much validates what I found, that Grand Rapids is a very interesting, in many ways progressive community that has been shaped by the migrant farm worker community of this country through their journey throughout the United States. Just before I came out, I met some people who had actually moved to Grand Rapids as young people because of this need to work. Okay. And I think that what is happening in Grand Rapids, which is thousands of miles removed from the border between the United States and Mexico, still speaks to this moment that we live in the country, where we get to decide whether we're going to be shaped by hate or whether we're going to be shaped by understanding and unity. I think that no matter what the rhetoric that is taking place in this country, that when I am home in Texas and I drive through the drive-through at the Taco Cabana, or I walk down the street, or I hear Tejano music in an elevator, I realized that it would be very difficult to create a wall that would separate a place that by culture or identity or shared experience has been unified by imagination for generations. I've never had an opportunity to work in a big urban setting before, but if you think about it, every major community of the United States either is today or will be within the next 20 years a Latino urban core. 54 million Latinos in the country today, 50,000 born every day. If we did nothing, it would be a disservice to our country. If you look at Miami, or you look at Houston, or you look at Chicago, or you consider Los Angeles or New York, the urban center of every major United States city is increasingly Latino, except we had never stopped to think about how urban planning should change to consider a future of these cities that is more bicultural or multicultural. So this is a place in my hometown called San Pedro Creek. It goes back 300 years to the founding of San Antonio. Many people, I don't know how much you know about San Antonio, but San Antonio is kind of known for the San Antonio Spurs, our basketball team, for the Alamo, and for the Riverwalk. But there is another place in San Antonio that is a waterway, and today if you were to go down there, it would look like this. It kind of looks like a drainage ditch. And in the 300 years ago, 200 years ago, even as recently as 100 years ago, it was the living room of the community. It's where everybody went. It was connected to the second oldest public park in the United States, which is called San Pedro Park. But it was purposefully filled in as a drainage ditch and became a dividing line for the community. Next. And so here is this opportunity to take a very important linear line in the community and change it. I don't know how many people have ever been to New York, for example, and seen the High Line, this great urban park? Well, this is like the High Line in that it's 2.5 miles long, and it is a project about reuse and recycling. And you have an opportunity to create new spaces that help heal both the physical environment from a sustainability standpoint and also heal the environment from a cultural standpoint as well. Next. So this is a project that kind of brings all of these ideas that I've been talking about together. It's funded. This is a historic theater called the Alameda Theater. This is a place that will have color and tile work, but most importantly, it's a place in which we will retell the narrative of the founding of the city of San Antonio in time to celebrate the 300th anniversary of the community. Next. And it reuses many of those the aspects of a drainage ditch, but transforms them from a thing of technological know-how into a thing of beauty. And it greens it up. Next. And it uses the work of local artisans and excavates places that were buried back at the beginning of the 20th century. Next. And it has places along the parkway that will allow every culture that has impacted San Antonio's history, from the Native American to the Italian American to the German American to the Mexican American, to have its place and tell the complete story of San Antonio. Next. Next. I think everybody, no matter what your career path or what your area of study, has an opportunity to find a voice and to use it for the betterment of the person sitting next to you. I remember that when I was a little boy, my father, who was a labor leader, who was the son of a man who crossed that Rio Grande River, that some people today would have said was undocumented or illegal, who was the first person in his family to go to college, would come home and would show me and my sisters and my brother labor leader training films. So I'm sure I'm the only kid on the block who had to sit at home on Friday evenings and watch labor leader training films. But there was one film in particular called The Inheritance that was about the great immigrant experience of the United States, of people coming from Germany and Italy and working in the garment district of New York or the steel mills of Pennsylvania or the fields of Michigan. And in that film, the song that played throughout the film said, freedom and opportunity are not your birthright. You have to work for them, die for them, day and night for them, and every single day you earn them all over again. I'm sure that my grandfather, that undocumented citizen of the United States, would never have dreamed that his grandson would speak in a beautiful place like this, or would become the CEO of a company would be given an opportunity to found a scholarship fund, would start a movement of people with a famous actress like Eva Longoria, would work for the President of the United States. But that's the country we live in. And since I work for the President, I will, in a nonpartisan fashion, say, I'm sure that this presidential election is going to work its way out one way or the other. But the only thing that will defeat our country is if we are silent. Whatever you believe, you have to use your voice. In my family, we used to say, su voto es su voz. There is about 13 months now between us and the election of a person to the highest office in this country. And if you turn on the television or pick up the newspaper or press your iPad, you will see that there are some people who are running for president who would, for the highest office in this country, who would get there by the lowest means of expression. And so I think that at this crossroads, this intersection that our country resides in, it is really important for us to carefully consider what is coming next for the country. And to use whatever it is that we have at our disposal, be it architecture or classwork or activism of some kind, to help impact it. This is the National Mall in Washington, D.C. This is the place where people go to express who they are as a people, where democracy in many ways is voiced, right? Where you have heard some of the greatest speeches in American history. I Have a Dream, where the great museums of the American people of the Smithsonian Institution reside. Next year, we will open the National Museum of the African American History and Culture next. And hopefully, thereafter, Congress will create the Smithsonian American Latino Museum, because what is in the best interests of the country is an environment of cultural understanding. That we are a better country when the entire American story is illuminated for the benefit of all of its citizens. Next. So this is a picture I took today. In front of the White House, the very first words of the Pope, I brought out with me so I wouldn't forget it. His first trip to the United States, and his very first words were, he kind of came out, I should just tell the story, he came out, and in the crowd, you could hear, he said good morning, and you could hear good morning in many languages, including buenos dias. For me, that was the most incredible American moment, to hear the response to him in so many different languages. And here is the first thing he said. As the son of an immigrant family, I am happy to be a guest in this country, which was largely built by such families. We can be silent. We can be hateful. Or we can take the greatest principles of democracy, the very foundation upon which this country has been built, and use it to the benefit of each other, and make sure that the future of the United States of America is secure. Secure in the principles of freedom and justice and equality. Think about it. From 1965, a little boy, not really understanding what he was doing, standing on a stage, carrying a sign for $1.25 minimum wage for the migrant farm workers of the United States, to 2015, sitting in the audience, watching a mixed heritage president and a Latino Pope talking about the future of this world. How are you going to dream? What is your dream? What is your dream for the future of this country? Sometimes I get to go home and I sit on the back porch of my house in Texas and I think about the kind of country that will be left to the 3 young girls who are the next generation of my family, and to my godsons who live here in Grand Rapids. And I wonder if they will know the sweet taste of a victory that changes people's lives. And that is what motivates me to come to places like this community and to spread this idea that this is really our time. And that even if you feel like you don't have a voice or you don't have any power, that nobody will listen to you, you're wrong. The future is right here in your hands, and the decision is yours about how to use it. The only thing that can defeat our country is our silence. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you, Mr. Meals. For how many students do we have here tonight? Raise your hands. A lot of students.
I hope they're giving you extra credit for this.
Yes. So if you want to step up and ask some questions, we'll do a few questions at this time. Any questions that you have? Please don't be shy.
I just have a general question for you. Why do you think there's been so much attention paid to the Latinos? And I'm not saying it's good attention in the political sphere.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a very good question. I think that I don't know how much you know about this part of my life, but in 2008, I helped to organize an effort called the Futuro, and it was really an attempt to organize the Latino community to speak with its voice. And when that effort was over, people referred to the Latino community as the sleeping giant. And slowly over the course of the last few years, only the last few years, there's been a recognition, I think kind of a waking up. I don't think that the Latino community was asleep, right? But I think that people began to wake up to the shifting demographics of the country. And so now people see what is happening in the Latino community connected to the civil rights movement and to feminism and in some ways to the LGBT community. And now it appears that there is a moment in this country. And I think it's scary to some people. I think it's You know, it scares me sometimes. I mean, I like am in a place where sometimes I travel the country with leadership, and you see people standing on the corners, and the things that you see on the corners are signs that are filled with hate. And so I think in today's world now, the only way that something becomes a very prominent idea or an episode is when there's so much saturation, right, of that conversation, because people don't do, like when I grew up, my whole family would stop and watch the evening news, and that doesn't happen anymore. So now the way that you get all of this is that it has to be repeated and repeated and repeated, and no matter what you say about Donald Trump, for example, he's this very interesting coagulation of reality, television, and celebrity, and a presidential campaign, and his words have now brought Latinos to the forefront of this presidential election. And so I believe that whatever side of that issue you're on, people will look at this moment in our history as the time that the Latino community really elected the next president of the United States. You have one Latino running for president. You have a couple of presidential candidates who actually speak Spanish, which is the first time that that's happened. One potential First Lady of the United States who was actually born in Mexico. And so I think it will continue, this will continue to be a part of the national conversation as we go forward.
Thank you for coming so far, amigo Manes. My honorific name is amigo Namohoringiko. I have a couple questions.
Sure.
I have some friends, they're from Mexico, Santo Domingo, in South America, and they're working here, but they say they don't have green cards, documentations. Mm-hmm. How do they go about receiving that?
Well, that's a very complex question. It would depend on their specific situation. Really, the only relief that people who are in this country undocumented have today is the DREAM Act. So depending upon their age, if they were brought to this country and they meet the criteria of DACA, then they can apply to remain in this country, but that is not an answer to the issue of having so many people in this country who are here in an undocumented fashion. So my recommendation would be, like many people, that they contact ICE and find out what their potential status is.
Thank you. I have one more question. Mm-hmm. In Nevada, mm-hmm. prostitution is legal in suburbs, I believe. I was wondering, is prostitution legal or illegal in Mexico?
I don't know the answer to that, actually. I don't know.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Namo Horengiko.
Thank you.
Hi, Henry. Thanks for coming back.
Thank you.
My question is really around, the identity around being Latino can be very vast. And so as a third generation Mexican American in this country, I often wonder, how can I be the best ally to those undocumented students or undocumented family or friends? And so could you speak about how we can come together as a very diverse population to make sure that we are truly being allies to people who, just depending on when my family decided to come, that could have been my experience. So could you speak about that?
Yeah. When I started to do all of this exploration, both in my design work and in my philanthropy and activism, I thought that I would go out and I would learn that Latino was one thing, but the truth of the matter is I couldn't even find a common. It was hard for me to find, even amongst the Mexican and Mexican American population, an identity that was from Brownsville, Texas to Laredo, Texas to San Antonio, Texas. So then when I started to travel around the country and I realized that the Dominicans in New York City were very different than the Puerto Ricans who were living in Orlando, Florida, were very different from the El Salvadorians who were living in Los Angeles. It became this complexity, right? And many people would look at the Latino community of the United States and say that immigration is our #1 issue. And immigration is a very important issue, and it's an emotional issue that goes to right here for so many of the Latino community. But the truth of the matter is what unites us, maybe besides a language, although I have to tell you, there's so many of us who are, not even bilingual. What unites us is the same thing that unites everybody, and that's an aspiration for the benefits of the American dream, right? To have the ability to educate ourselves and our children and our families, to have a job, to create a better environment, a more stable environment for ourselves and our community. And so I'll be very specific with you. I think that the issues that affect undocumented people will not be resolved unless you vote. I think if you believe that Congress needs to work out something, something. You can imagine this dream scholarship was created out of a frustration that nothing was happening in Washington, right? That you have to do something. So I think the way that you can support people like that is to make your voice heard. And the only way to make your voice heard, as the gentleman said before, because there is a great focus on the Latino community of the United States, is to make whatever you believe, to make your voice heard by voting in this next presidential election. So you got to vote. You have to vote. How many people, you got to vote. I won't even ask you to raise your hands, but I will tell you, you have to vote. One last thing. I meet so many people who come from countries where you can't vote. And then I meet people, and I ask them, even people who work with me, did you vote? And they didn't vote. It's crazy.
I have a question on immigration. What your opinion is, and if you personally are trying to help the immigration process, maybe to reform it in any way to make it easier for the people that really need to come to America for better lives to have that opportunity, and maybe harder for the people that shouldn't be in America, or should have a more intense screening process, if there's any work on trying to reform that at all?
Well, I probably could have had a different job. I think it might have been easy for me to go out of the country and be an ambassador after the election in 2012. And I actually asked to take the job I have in order to stay in the country and work on immigration reform. There is so much focus on immigration reform from a particular perspective, and less focus on the fact, particularly immigration reform with regard to Latino presence in the United States, and less focus on the fact that the immigration system in the United States is just fundamentally broken, and that it's very difficult for people who could be great contributors to this country, and I'm not just talking about Latinos, but who could be great contributors to this country, to navigate the complexity of the immigration system. So I believe that our immigration system does need to be reformed. I don't think it's going to be easy to do it. Clearly, there needs to be a great conversation amongst the leadership in Washington about how to accomplish that. I am a firm believer and an advocate for reform, and because I see both the opportunity and I see the challenges. I have this very interesting now job where I get to go and see that, and in some ways it's very hurtful because it separates families. In many ways it's very hurtful to the economy of the United States because there are people who want to work here, who can contribute to the greatness of this country, which goes right back to the founding principles of this country. And so whatever happens in the next couple of years, because I don't think anything's going to happen before this election in November of 2016, I hope that the people who will come after November of 2016 will do what it seems like we used to do in this country, which is to approach things on in a bipartisan fashion and find a solution. Wouldn't it be great? Wouldn't it be great if we just did what we used to do and talked to each other and worked it out? Makes sense, but sometimes in Washington, nothing makes sense.
Hi. I'm also an artist, and I enjoyed hearing about your visual perspective. And so I'm wondering if, while you're here in Grand Rapids, if you were at all inspired to potentially do an architectural project here as well.
I would love to do an architectural project here in Grand Rapids. Because I think Grand Rapids is such an interesting place, right, culturally. The thing that I like to do in my design work is that I like to find something about the identity of people and reflect it in some way, whatever that is. If you went to our website at our office, you would see every single project looks different, based upon the people who inhabit that project and their stories, and how they want to see their community represented. So this is probably where I'm supposed to say, not only for an architectural project, but I hope you'll go out to Calder Plaza. I hope you'll look at Port of Entry, which is this great architectural installation that is sitting right next to the Calder. I think that may be a reflection of the fact that even here in Grand Rapids, people think that the Latino presence has a lot of resonance and is an important part of the discussion. And however you vote for Art Prize, I hope maybe you'll be inspired to vote for Port of Entry, because I think it's all of the people who've worked on it, including many of the volunteers from the Hispanic Center here in Grand Rapids, have spent hours working on this, and it's beautiful. So thanks for the question.
Hi, Henry. My name is Kevin Carrillo. I'm one of the students here at Grand Rapids Community College. I'm not applying any pressure towards you guys, but the Dream.us helping DECA students, I think it's great, and you guys have done nothing but a great job. But are you guys doing anything towards reaching education equity throughout the country, finding financial aid for DECA students? Some states have already started, but is the Dream.us doing anything towards that?
That's an interesting question. In the building of the dream, right, you got to recognize this started, can you raise $1 million? Then can you raise $2 million? Then can you over the course of 10 years, because it was really only supposed to last for as long as there didn't exist in the country immigration reform. So you understand that dreamers can't get financial aid in many cases, right? They are not qualified, they can't qualify for Pell Grants, et cetera. So this was an attempt to try and help that. Well, now that we're sitting on this side of $91 million raised, and you realize that you can make a bigger dent in that community, now you can begin to look at whether it can actually take on some advocacy work to help inspire equity. The nature of the Dream.us, so let me give you another commercial for this scholarship fund. It's a 4-year scholarship. It is not a $2,500 scholarship to help you with a semester of expenses. If you get accepted to the Dream.us and you get accepted to one of the partner colleges at the Dream.us, as long as you can, and this is a scholarship fund that is not intended to serve the 4.0 student who can go to Stanford, right? This is a scholarship fund that is intended to help a community college student or a student who really has great financial need and wants to attend a public university but is having trouble realizing that. So, if you become a Dream Scholar, you have 4 years, and the partner college is actually a partner college to help realize that. So I think the answer is, now that we're at this point and we're realizing that there does have to be greater equity and there are more opportunities to partner with other colleges across the United States, you'll begin to see maybe some of that happen. We just didn't, I mean, who knew? How do you know when you start this and then, wow, in 2 years, you're almost at $100 million. So, well, thanks to the generosity of many great leaders around the country. So I think you'll begin to see it expand.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, thank you for being here with us today. My name is Carla Garrido. I have a question. I have to write some notes down. So you mentioned that we live in a world where Hispanics are taking leadership roles, and then you use, I believe her name is Eva Longoria, I'm not sure, an actress in a TV show as an example, which I don't think that was the best example. I do a lot of research on companies, specifically financial institutions, and when I look at their board of directors, never have I seen, and a publicly owned, perhaps bank or firm, never have I seen a Hispanic on those boards. So with that, and I know there's community leaders, but there aren't many leaders who have such powerful roles, for example, as like yours, saying that it's a little difficult to network. It would be difficult to network. So what would you suggest, or what would you do to help Hispanic students like myself being able to network and figure out maybe, connect with these leaders? I'm sorry, I hope you understand my question.
I understand. Okay, well, there's a few questions in there. So first of all, let me talk about Eva, okay, because she really is a great friend, and she's the co-founder of a project called Latino Victory. And the model of it, the interesting thing about Eva Longoria that many people don't know, because most people think about her as a desperate housewife or an actress, but she's also a great producer and a documentary filmmaker and a great philanthropist and activist. So she also just got about a year and a half ago, her master's degree in Chicano Studies from the University of California. And if she were giving this lecture today, she would tell you that the only reason why she acts is so that she can afford to give all of her money away to efforts like this. A very interesting person. You're right. So if you think about this as nothing ever happens overnight, and it is a movement of people that takes a step and then another step and another step, you're absolutely right that there aren't enough Latinos on the boards of major Fortune 100, 500 companies. There are not enough Latinos who are in the position of owning their own businesses. And it's not fair. And it is changing, and it is changing slowly. You will now begin to see, if you look back, there just was a major convening of the U.S. Hispanic Chamber of Commerce in Houston, Texas, earlier this week. Today may be the last day, and a major portion of their conversation is about the lack of Latino and diversity in general on the board of directors of the companies that run this country. So let's talk about Latino Victory for a minute. Latino Victory was started because it's really important that we reach back and people like myself help other people to walk through that door. It's what other communities have done incredibly effectively over the course of the last 20 or 30 or 50 years. And so my answer to you is we need to help search out those opportunities where somebody like myself can have a conversation with somebody like you and turn it into something. If you'll stay afterwards, we'll try and find that answer for you. But in general, the concept of Latino Victory is that we have to mentor. And it's not good enough to just open the door. We have to reach back and pull the people who come behind us, primarily young people, through that door with us. It's interesting. You should go to the Latino Victory Project.us too.
Well, One more question. And so then, do you ever suggest to your fellow friends, Hispanic friends, or they don't even have to be Hispanic, to be honest? Do you ever suggest to them to mentor young students like
All the time. And let me tell you why I do it. 54 million Latinos, 50,000 every month. 1 in 4 students in the future will look like you. So if we're not doing it, right, if there isn't a Latino museum on the mall in Washington, D.C., that's not a disservice to, not only a disservice to the Latino community, that's a disservice to the Smithsonian Institution, because increasingly their audience will look like you. And so it's really important that we build that ethic of mentorship, because you are in many ways the future of the United States, and you need help. And many people understand that. And the more that, for example, you begin to create that awareness in a place like Grand Rapids, which, what is the population of Grand Rapids, a Latino population of Grand Rapids, approaching 20%, then you wake up and you say, oh, it's in our own best interest to do something. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Quick question. I just wondered, the park that you showed, the San Pedro Park, is that already completed or is that still underway? Because I want to go there.
Oh, okay. Well, it'll be a nice one. It will start construction next year, okay. And it will be open in time for 2018, which is the 300th anniversary of San Antonio, Texas, as it's founded by Spain and the United States. So I'll just tell you a quick kind of like Forrest Gump story, because that's what happens to me nowadays. Last Friday, I went to St. Augustine, Florida, and had dinner with the King and the Queen of Spain. Do you know about St. Augustine, Florida? Right? 450 years old. Really, in many ways, the oldest city in the United States, which is the reverse, right, the parallel city to Plymouth Rock and the Mayflower. This already existed, really, right? 450 years old. But the trip was to convince the Spanish government that they should come to San Antonio around the opening of San Pedro Creek to help commemorate that 300th anniversary. Such a rich history, such an interesting place to be.
Great.
Sir.
Thank you again. And I was curious, with your background and experience and knowledge around systems of oppression, what you view as one of the best strategies or in working against systems of oppression. And my understanding, it sounds like from the scholarship found that education might be on there, but I just wanted to ask that question.
Wow. It's interesting that it is oppression in many ways. And you're right, fundamentally, when people are educated, then it makes it harder for that to exist. So, but I really have begun, I actually went back to school last summer just to see if I could still do it. And I went to school and took a course on the history of movements in the United States. I was very interested in how the civil rights movement was born and what it looked like. And feminism, for example, the idea that women in the past and in many ways even today are still not equal partners in the governance and economic equality of this country. And so that's a very interesting question that basically depends upon people organizing themselves, some people working on the inside, some people working on the outside, right? Like people would look at the Dreamers as a very well-organized brand of activists who challenges authority. And there has to be a moment. If you look at the history of the LGBT political movement and that moment of oppression and police brutality, it really wasn't until Stonewall and the stories that were told about Stonewall and the very hard work over a long period of time to convince gay people that they should come out, right? That was the moment. And so I say a moment, even though it was spread over years. And you may be, I keep going back to your issue. And this is a moment, right? When the Pope begins his first speech in the United States, talking about the immigrant culture that made our country great. It's a moment.
Hello.
Hi.
Do you have any advice for in the workplace as far as trying to bring more diversity and inclusion to that arena? Sometimes the words are spoken where it's welcome, but maybe the actions don't necessarily match the words.
Mm-hmm. The best companies in the United States that I've seen deal with diversity are the companies that, and they could be a small company, I run a small company, but they're the companies that recognize that there is a challenge and they develop a plan and they work toward a successful implementation of that plan. You're pretty smart, right? I could tell already just by the way that you asked your question. And so there is in many ways in this country a dual language. And you understand when people use one language, but they don't really mean it. And there's code words embedded in that language that sound right, but you know they aren't right. And for the most part, I believe now, the best companies in this country who are devoted to diversity, right, and who recognize the need for it, that it's in their own best interests, right? Design a plan and then implement a plan. Those are the companies that are the household name in your neighborhood, in your city, or in globally. And so I'm not a big businessman, I'm a small businessman, but we just put diversity, like everything even about the mission of our design work is that we really live it. And so I think you have to approach it positively. I believe that typically, most companies want to be successful. And when you explain diversity as a means to being successful, they really want to be a part of that. I probably kept you here too long, but let me just tell you, this was an incredible day for me. It was an incredible day for me, and to be here in Grand Rapids, to be able to speak honestly with you about the things that I see over the course of a week like this week, and to be able to share that experience with you and to see Grand Rapids evolve and change in the way that it views itself, and to be here during a week like Art Prize, which is, such an incredible national. It's really important. Like, I had no idea how important Art Prize was, but it's a big deal. It's a really big deal. And to be here this week when the world turns its attention to Grand Rapids during a week when there's such an incredible focus on culture and cultural identity, it's an honor to be here with you all. And I look into this audience and I'm really thankful that the young people in particular who are asking these questions, that the future's in their hands. Thank you, Chris, and thank you, Carla.